Hello everybody, Megazard X here. I'm back at it again to give y'all another exciting My Hero Academia episode review, and this time we're going to be reviewing episode 68, Let's Go Gusty Red Riot. And if you haven't already checked out my episode 67 review over last week's episode, you can go ahead and click that card in the corner and check that video out, and then come back and check this one though. But oh my freaking goodness, this episode as a whole, I have to admit, I was standing on my 2 feet during like a few moments in this episode. And to all y'all Kirishima fans out there, man, this episode was for you because, man, I love pretty much almost every single one of the characters that are, within Class 1A though. But for y'all Kirishima fans out there, man, this was y'all's episode. And man, this dude was pulling out all the stunts and all the breaks in order to keep everybody safe and protected within his fight scenario though. And then we got a lot more things kind of developing with the plot and everything else though. But there's just quite a bit to go over with this episode though. So go ahead and sit back and relax and get comfortable as we're about to get ready to review this episode 68 of Let's Go Gusty Red Riot.
あの日守ると決めた約束はこの胸に精一杯この涙かき分けて君に全てをあげるからお願いどうか消えないでくれあの日守ると決めた約束
So starting off at the very beginning of the episode, we see a little scene where there was like a bunch of what you could probably call like bandits or kind of like small little villains or whatever though. They're not like big shots or anything like that. But you see some people, causing some ruckus in the city and whatnot though. And then you see Najiro Hado just busting out of the scene and using her quirk, which Surge, so she kind of deals with electricity. And she was taking out some dudes, and then, quickly you saw 2 other people jumping in, and we saw Ochako as well as Sue, and they were, basically floating up in the air with a bunch of like rock rebel and stuff, and then Sue's basically slapped down the rebel down. So it was a nice little 2-1 combo between Ochako and Sue using their quirks, and they were basically able to, stop the villains wherever they were at. And then, as the dust basically settled, we basically saw the number 9 hero, according to the charts, the dragon hero Ryuchu. She came out to the scene, and it was at this point where it was clear and evident that Najiro Hado was basically doing a work study underneath Ryuchu, and it was thanks to that connection with Hado that Ochako and Sue were able to form that connection with them, and that's how they were able to do their work studies underneath the number 9 hero. And we saw Ryuchu basically say, hey, you know what, girls, y'all did a really good job, and y'all did so good to the fact that I might consider having y'all work within another case file I'm about to have that's about to come up. And essentially Ryuchu told them that, hey, there was a case file where they needed to incorporate a part of her company to work with another company, and that's Sarnadai's agency, the same one that Izuku's working underneath with his work study, for an investigation takedown over the Yakuza group. So it was nice basically seeing Ochako as well as Sue get a tiny little moment to shine within this episode though. But this was definitely not the emphasis of the episode, as this is where the real meat and potatoes of the episode come on. Like that was like the appetizer, that first little scene right there though. But here comes the main course right here. So essentially Shigaraki was walking into the Yakuza group headquarters, and he basically tried to lay out the terms and conditions over this new partnership that Overhaul basically came to, the League of Villains headquarters to try to propose, but then things went completely down south with that episode though. And Shigaraki basically, he got himself comfortable. He sat back on that chair, propped his feet up on that table, and said, all right, look here, I'm about to give the real shots, because hey, I see a partnership with you, but hey, you know what? I'm not going to work underneath you. This got to be, this got to be like a co-partnership, so we got to be on the same equal footing. So while Shigaraki was basically kind of laying out those terms and conditions, he basically wanted to pull something out of his jacket. He wanted to kind of show them or say something about something, and immediately, the Yakuza group members, the 2 other members that were with Overhaul, they got a little jumpy, and immediately they jumped out, and that thing in that shadow cloak thing just pulled out like a big old massive arm that was holding Shigaraki back. And then you had another dude that was pointing a gun at the back of Shigaraki's head, and they were like, dang. And then Shigaraki over here looking at them like, did this person really try to challenge me like this? After the terms are definitely not even after their first little encounter, because they did get a blow for blow. They lost one man on each side, but then there was one member on Shigaraki's side that lost the arm. So he said, you know what, I gotta have a little bit of compensation for, you know, that previous scenario though. And then Overhaul's just back here is like, you know what, yeah, he's kind of right. Just let him be. Just let him lay out his terms and conditions. I'll hear the man out. And then essentially from there, we jump into a different scene where we basically see the last other big three hero being Tamaki Amajiki. And Tamaki Amajiki was the dude that had a connection with Fat Gum. And it was Kirishima that basically, you know, talked to him and begged and pleaded to him wherever he was basically residing at, after he got that little invitation that, you know, that Tamaki wanted to talk to him. And he begged and pleaded to the dude, and man, it really got on his nerves. And there's something about this dude and his character, because you think that, you know, he would be like one of those kind of cocky, kind of sly little guys from the way that he kind of looks at, you know, surface level, at the skin level. But when you really get to look at his character, he's kind of shy, a little bit timid, and sort of kind of like a scaredy cat to a kind of degree. So it was kind of a little bit off-putting, because I didn't think like one of the big three members like that would actually have a character that's sort of kind of like that. But it does make this very unique in terms of, you know, My Hero Academia, where you never really see, you know, two characters with similar natures, rarely ever, within the whole entire anime as a whole though. So those three were basically walking down the streets, and they were on patrol, just, you know, keep an eye out on what's going on. And sometimes, like, you know, thugs or groups of gangs or anything else, they can, you know, cause a little bit of a ruckus. So they were just kind of going through and patrolling the streets and whatnot. But then there were some people that were trying to run away from somebody, and we figured out that they're basically a gang that was selling illegal drugs. And then we get to see a first case showing of Tamaki's quirk, and this quirk is called Manifest, and he can take on the characteristics from whatever he eats. So in that scenario that it was in the episode, the dude basically had like some squid fingers that popped out of nowhere, and then he had, in his hand, it basically turned into a clam, and then this dude has some wings, and it basically said that it was from him eating the squid, the clam, as well as some chicken, that basically gave him those three different characteristics from his quirk. So that's very interesting to kind of see somebody have a quirk that he can basically kind of manipulate his body to based upon whatever he eats. So that in itself is actually pretty cool, and I think that's honestly that could be a really good quirk, because you can combine a lot of different stuff with different animals that you can eat. So that's really cool in itself though. Now this is the point in the episode where we're basically having two scenes happening simultaneously at the same time. So we did a little bouncing back and forth with this part of the episode, and there was a quick little scene where Shigaraki basically pulled this thing out of his jacket, and the thing he pulled out of his jacket was this little piece of something that basically had a little needle at the very end of it, and he basically wanted to talk about Overhaul's plan and how he was going to be able to do what he wants to do in terms of, you know, shaking up society. And he wanted to question what that little piece of thing was, and he noted that whenever one of his members got shot by that little substance, that basically he couldn't control his quirk anymore for a brief period of time. And that's what he kind of wanted to question, like, what is your angle and what is your overall plan? And basically Overhaul basically laid it out to him and said, you know what, you know how All For One basically took everybody's powers and basically used it for himself? He basically took that idea of how All For One's quirk was, and he twisted it a little bit. He basically said to Shigaraki, hey, I'm basically planting seeds everywhere, and essentially when the moment is right to strike, I will strike, but basically I'm laying down the groundwork for bigger things that is to come. Then we shift back to the scene with our heroes, where they basically caught almost all of the gang members except for one person that was hiding within the crowd. And he was so worried. He's like, dang, a lot of my friends are getting caught. I gotta do something. And he pulls up the gun and shoots it. And essentially Tamaki basically kind of got in the way to try to shield Kirishima from the blow, and essentially he succeeded in that though. But however, he noticed that he couldn't use his quirks anymore, and then the dude tried to fire off another bullet, but instead of, you know, shooting the same dude twice again, he was trying to shoot after Kirishima, but thanks to Kirishima's quirk with his hardening, he was able to basically reflect that bullet off of him and basically shatter it. And then he's like, you know what, I'm gonna target you now. I got your name and I got your number. I'm about to head right after your butt. And essentially he started to chase him down, and he got the gang member, you know, cornered in the back alley, you know, ideally in a good situation where there wasn't too many bystanders that were around, where not too many people would have, you know, potentially got harmed due to the clash that these two were about to do. However, you know, the dude wasn't going to go down swinging. So basically this dude kind of played a little sorry game a little bit, where he was basically like sort of kind of crying, kind of putting on a show, trying to lower Kirishima's guard, and he's basically saying, you know what, I just wanted to get more power, I just want to protect my buddies, and yada yada yada. And then Kirishima, you know, he's the kind of person that, you know, is gonna listen to a person and try to relate and try to, you know, show some concern, even to enemies that, you know, have done harm or whatever, though, in which he hasn't done too much harm at, you know, the eye level of what he basically saw him doing with him just shooting them and stuff. He saw his member was fine and everything, though, but, you know, Kirishima did let his guard down for just enough time to where the dude pulled out this big old red vial that basically he shot in his neck, and it basically amped up his quirk by quite a bit, and we're talking about a drastic amount. And this dude basically shot blades out of multiple parts of his bodies, because at first he can only shoot out blades that maybe, you know, it was less than a foot, but it was like some fairly decent blades. But, you know, Kirishima was able to easily block that with his hardening quirk. But after he took this vial, this dude's quirk spiked so much that he shot blades out of all the different parts of his body. And these blades were so long that he was standing in the middle of the street and he was still able to hit buildings to the side and everything like that. And these blades were so sharp that he was even cutting through Kirishima's hardening quirk. So we knew these blades were, you know, extremely sharp. And if it was anybody but Kirishima down in that alley like that, oh gosh, man, who knows what would have happened if it would have been one of our other 1-8 students that were in that spot instead of Kirishima, if the scenarios were flipped around like that. So essentially this dude was basically having his way with Kirishima, and there wasn't too much that he could do, and he knew he had to take some hits because there were some bystanders that he told basically, hey, go ahead and evacuate the area though. But you know how you're struck with fear and everything, you know, you're so frightened that you can't really move, or you're not really thinking straight. So he still had to, you know, keep in the back of his mind that, hey, there are some other civilians that are around in this area, so I can't just do, you know, jump out of the way, you know, in certain case scenarios, because who knows, one of those blades could actually go back behind and hit one of the bystanders, and who knows how many people were actually within the buildings inside. So he knew he had to take down this villain fast, and I mean fast. But overall, the dude was basically overpowering him in almost every single aspect. And then there basically was a scene where the dude was, you know, sending out his blades and was focusing it towards Kirishima, and it almost seemed like Kirishima was down for the count, and he was almost about to accept that for a brief moment. But then you see a little bit of a flashback scene with Kirishima recalling some past events, and there was a scene where there was one time All Might said that instead of Kirishima doing some small, quick, flashy tricks with his hardening, he should try to act more like a bulldozer. And in the dorms, he was basically saying that to some of his friends that were nearby, and he was just kind of reflecting and kind of thinking out loud though. But then this is where you saw the connection that, you know, Bakugo has with Kirishima, because Bakugo said, you must have forgot what you told me during the cavalry battle when you said that, you know, you needed a strong front horse, and that was Kirishima. And that one time when All Might fighting All for One, and even despite that brutal battle between the two and how he was quickly almost sort of kind of losing that battle, he still managed to, you know, fight strong and managed to stand up to the person. And that's what Bakugo really wanted to emphasize, was the fact that, you know, during these tough times and these hard scenarios, that just standing up makes you stronger. And it was this little motivation of him recalling back those past moments that motivated him to push beyond his limits. And essentially his quirk started to go into overdrive, and we saw the dude hardening and hardening and hardening even more, to the point where he basically maximized his quirk. And he said essentially that for the next 30 seconds or so that his, you know, quirk is at a maximum, and that basically almost nothing can get in his way in terms of anything cutting him or trying to, you know, pierce or go through him. And basically he could take almost any hits in that kind of state and condition. And it was really cool seeing this stuff animated out and everything else like that, because, man, this dude, oh my gosh, this is the point where I was standing up on my 2 feet, because I was like, Kirishima, this man over here never disappoints me, no matter what this man is doing in this anime though. And it was a really hype moment, and oh gosh, I just loved every little second of it. And this dude was taking on several blades, all directly pointed at him, and he still was able to hold his ground and be able to protect all of the other civilians in the nearby area though. And then essentially, you know, that struggle, it didn't last much longer while he was in that quirk boosted state, and he took down the guy with ease. And essentially, you know, all seemed good at that moment in time. And then the dude basically put on his, you know, sob story again, whatnot, and lowered Kirishima's guard one more time, to where at that point, dude took off using his blades to kind of shoot and propel himself up, and, you know, towards like back out the alley. And this is where Fat Gum essentially showed up, and he basically caught the dude within his fat and was basically able to immobilize the dude. And then this is where we kind of get a quick little breakdown of Fat Gun's powers. And his quirk is fat absorption, and it can basically absorb anything into his fat body. So it was kind of interesting to see that out, and I guess there might be some cool, unique ways of basically being able to use that quirk to essentially immobilize people. I think that's the number one thing that kind of comes to my mind with a quirk like that, is you'll be able to quickly immobilize people with a quirk like that. And then, you know, after this whole scene is over with though, all the people that were the bystanders that saw this fight happen with Kirishima and the other dude, they basically were congratulating him and saying, you know what, thank you for saving me, and you know, hey, what's your hero name? And you know what, I'm never gonna forget your name now. And it was really nice to kind of see Kirishima, you know, being able to take in all of these high-worthy praise from the people that he just saved. And then it made Kirishima think that to a flashback of a scene where it seemed like there was a woman kind of running away, and it seemed like there was some kind of attack that almost looked similar to a school, and you see like a brief shot of a person looking down, which we kind of assumed that was Kirishima, and he was kind of reflecting on a day of, you know, why didn't I try to help or try to stand up in, and that's essentially all we got from that flashback though. But it was a nice little moment of just seeing Kirishima's character development grow, and it was something I really kind of appreciate though, but did leave us a little bit of questions for his character, which I'm really looking forward to. Basically, after the way how this episode played out, I'm really looking forward to the way how Kirishima is basically going to be able to provide support within these next upcoming episodes for this next arc. And essentially, after this whole scene was over with, you know, the other three people were basically gathered back together. You had Fat Gun, you had Kirishima, and you also had the other member of the Big Three. And they're all gathering around, and they were just kind of talking about all of the events that basically played out. And they were talking about those drugs and saying, you know, the drugs over here in Japan, you know, they last for like short little bursts, but the drugs that you'll get from the United States or America, hey, those last up to like almost an hour though. So, you know, these weren't really strong drugs, and they were just trying to figure out what was going on. And then you see Fat Gum over there just thinking and pondering the matter of fact that, hey, you know, they were able to come up with a drug that not only helped boost somebody's quirk, which, you know, we're kind of used to seeing, but there was also a drug that basically could stop a person's quirk. He started thinking about that, and he's like, oh man, you know what, this could spell like a bad omen of things to come, because whatever we're dealing with, it could provide a lot of trouble. And then this is essentially where you had the break in the episode, and this is where you had the ending song play, and that was the mass majority part of the episode. Then we transitioned back to the school, where a lot of the students were basically giving praise towards Kirishima's success, as well as Sue's and Uraraki's success for their first jobs with their work study whenever they were on the patrols for both of them. And you kind of saw Bakugo in the background getting mad and frustrated. As a matter of fact, that many of his other classmates were starting to, you know, widen that gap distance between him thanks to their work studies and everything though. It was kind of a little nice little comedic effect that was kind of going on with the background though. And then essentially we get to shoot back to Izuku, because this was basically a Kirishima focused episode, but this last little segment that they were doing is basically kind of like a little bit of a tiny little bridge they're kind of building back and making the connections from the last episode to the moments that basically happened in this episode for the moments that are about to happen within the next episode. And that was just one more reflection that Izuku basically had about, you know, why in the world did those tragic events happened between Sarnada and All Might that basically started to split their relationship in half. And the fact of the matter that one scene of Izuku basically letting that girl Eri go, and how she was so helpless, and the matter of fact that memory of him letting her go is chewing him up from the inside out each and every day as each day passes. And it was just kind of sad to kind of see that and just kind of think back from the previous episode on that note. But overall, that was it for this episode. So that was pretty much a lot to take in, but overall, for the Kirishima fans that are out there, this was definitely y'all's episode. And overall, I really enjoyed this episode. For it not to basically kind of focus on Izuku, but be able to focus on a different class student from 1A, and be able to pull all of the mess that they did in this episode, it was really good, and I really enjoyed it from start to finish though. But y'all gotta let me know down in the comment section what all y'all thought about this episode though, because man, after this episode, I am definitely looking forward to the next week's episode. But that is all that I have for y'all for this week's episode review over My Hero Academia. So if you really like this video, go ahead and hit that like button and the subscribe button and that bell to keep up to date on all things My Hero Academia. So what will be discussed at Sword Night Agency about the events of the Yakuza group Shiea Hazaka? And what evil plots does this organization have? And why is Eri being used for their evil plot? And will Izuku manage to save this girl this time around? We'll have to find out about this and more in next week's episode of An Unpleasant Talk. So remember y'all, until whatever video I make next, go beyond. Plus Ultra!